Hey everyone, this is Kyle with Wicked Edge. In this video today I'm going to be demonstrating how to use the Wicked Edge Commercial Series knife sharpener. So I've got here an awesome rhino cleaver from Rhineland Cutlery, and first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the knife in the sharpener using the depth settings here. So I've got my depth key. There's two settings, lower and an upper. For this knife, a knife this large, definitely want to use the lower settings. So, and then the blade on this doesn't have too much curvature to it. It does have has a little bit, but it doesn't have a drop point. So I can mount it approximately centered, and then I want the edge to be relatively as level as I can get it. So that means on this knife, I'm actually only contacting the depth key on one point. That's all right. So clamp the knife in place by just moving the lever downwards. If you clamp the knife and you've got a little rocking here, the Commercial Series has a tension adjustment lever on the back side, and you can adjust the clamping tension for thinner blades. This one's pretty firmly in here, so I don't need to adjust it at all. So then you'd remove your depth key. And actually, you know what? Before I do that, I'll show you the how to record your settings here. So this is a Wicked Edge alignment guide, and it plugs into the depth key, just hooks on like this, and then you just put it into the vise, and then you measure the point at which the tip falls, and that is on this, the D measurement. So then you take your instruction booklet, and then you would write down that your alignment is D, and your depth setting is the second setting. So once you've recorded your settings, you can remove these tools, and the next thing to do is find the angle of the edge. So I do that by taking a marker and coloring the bevel. And then the Commercial Series, the finest stone included with the Commercial Series is a 1,000 grit diamond stone. So I slide that onto the guide rod, and then I'm just gonna do some trial and error with the angle settings until I find an angle where that marker comes evenly off the bevel. So here I'm hitting just the very edge of the bevel, which means my angle's too wide, so I wanna bring it in closer. That's looking better. Moving in a little bit more. So that looks good right there. That is at 17 degrees per side. And this lever on the back side, when I move it, it moves the angles on both sides simultaneously. So once I've found the angle, then I'll switch to a coarser stone. Typically I try to start with a 400 grit. There are coarser stones included with this kit, a 100 and 200 grit, but I really only use these if I'm going to be doing some heavy regrinding on a knife or reshaping the bevel. For this, I'm just going to leave it as is, so I'll start with a 400. And then I just start on one side at a time, and I just make some scrubbing with the stone until all that marker's gone. All right, and then I'm gonna check for a burr, and you can do that by bringing your fingertip up the opposite side until you get to the edge, and you'll feel the metal curl over. I mean, it's really apparent if it's there. If you're having a hard time feeling it with your fingers, if you don't have very sensitive fingertips, then you can use a Q-tip or a cotton ball up the opposite side to see if the metal snags it. So I need to do a little bit more work. Okay, and I can feel a burn now. You can even hear it too as it's catching my finger as it comes off, kind of that popping noise. So then I switch to the other side, and again with a 400 grit stone, just scrubbing the edge. It's an up and down motion until all the marker's gone. And something I want to point out is where I'm holding the handle. When I'm doing the scrubbing motion, I like to hold the handle so that my hand never comes above the edge. That way, when I'm moving in a downward motion, I don't have a risk my hand coming into the edge. Sometimes finding the burr can be time consuming, but you want to take your time and do it right. I'd say this is the most important part of the sharpening process. If you don't find this burr here, it means your stones aren't actually reaching the apex of the edge, and you can go up all the way to your finest grit and you won't be sharp because you haven't reached the apex. Okay, I can feel a good burr there. Missing a little bit on the heel of the knife, so I just do a little bit more scrubbing just here. And I'm not using very much pressure at all. I'm basically just holding the stone into the blade and letting the weight of the stone really do all the work. There we go, there's a good burr. All right, so once I found the burr on both sides, I take both stones and then I'm just gonna alternate my stroke, moving upwards and out in an upward motion. So the stroke is really simple. I'm going a little fast, so I'll slow it down. I'm gonna start with your stone, the top of the stone against the heel of the knife, and push upwards and out to finish with the bottom of the stone coming off the tip of the knife. When you're first getting started with the system, it can feel a little weird doing it both sides simultaneously. So just start with one side, and the important thing to note is make sure that the stone is always flat against the edge. The tendency sometimes is to want to curl the stone, but just make sure it's flat on there. And then it helps to use pressure with your thumb instead of pulling up with your fingertips. That helps you get a better stroke and helps the stone stay flat. I typically do about 20 strokes per stone per side. If I'm trying for a high finish on the edge, high polish, then I'll do more. I can do up to 100. So once you've done about 20, then switch over to your 600 grit stone. And now I can switch to the 800 and 1000 grit. We'll do the 800 grit first. And now the 1000. All right, so that's it. This knife is now razor sharp, and so I would dismount it from the dismount it from the vise, and then also in the instruction manual, again in your knife log, you have the make, model, and the depth and the alignment positions recorded. Also record the angle setting, so that's 17 degrees, and then remove your knife. So the reason why recording your settings is important, especially for the majority of people who are purchasing the commercial series, that's going to be people in restaurants, butcher shops, etc. They're doing a lot of knives really quickly, and they want to be able to sharpen them and touch them up without having to reshape the blades. So the next time you go to sharpen this knife, it's not going to take nearly as long as the initial sharpening, because you're just going to go in to the same depth setting you used before, mount your knife, and make sure it's positioned to the same point it was before. Clamp it, set your angle to exactly where it was, and your touch-up shouldn't be more than 10 strokes. And then you just pop it out and move on to your next knife. So you can really do a lot of knives quickly with this machine.